is Monday, August 26th, 2024. This is the Newmarket Budget Committee. My name is Chris Wolf. I'm the Budget Committee Chair. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Dad, could you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, for the roll call, Chris Wolf, I'm here. Chris Blackstone.
Here.
Ned Carpenter.
Here.
Tim Choi.
Here.
Scott Foster. Not here yet. Justin Lusser.
Here.
Brian Hickey.
Here.
Daniel Honan.
Here.
Brian Rowley.
Here.
Dan Smith.
Here.
And Brian Ward.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, we'll begin by opening public session at 6:32. Seeing no member of the public here, we'll close public session at 6:32 and a half. Thank you. Today we're going to receive a report from the schools on last year and some fund balance issues. So welcome Todd and welcome Jenna.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I actually forwarded, you have three reports that have been shared with the board that we're going to talk about tonight. In the order that we're going to go in, we're first going to talk about the unassigned fund balance. That's the August 9th report. Then we'll talk about the retained fund balance. That's the June 18th report. And then I'll conclude with the budget discussion around level service and that sort of thing. So the intent here is to kind of give you an overview of kind of where we ended the year and also kind of give you some advanced idea of kind of where we're headed as we begin the budget development in the district. So I'm going to invite Jana to come up and talk to you about the unassigned fund balance and the retained fund balance, and I'll come back in just a moment to talk to you about the budget development process.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
So,
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us today.
yeah, just a moment, please. So it's now 6:34, and Scott Foster is joining us. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Sorry. And we have two documents that I'd like to review with you, and I think I'll start just because it's the number that most of you really care the most about, which is the amount of the fund balance that goes back to offset taxation. So we'll start there. These other documents inform that document, and we can get into a deeper discussion about those things afterwards. But so basically the unassigned fund balance, as most of you know, is the culmination of it's a calculated number. It's the culmination of our expenditure budget, what's left that we didn't expend, our revenue budget, anything additional, or in this case we had additional revenues that we had at the end of the year, plus accounting adjustments at the end of the year that are done as part of a regular audit. After all those things are gelled together, we're able to come up with a number, which at the end of the year, in essence, people talk about it being returned to the taxpayers to offset tax effort. But basically what it is it becomes part of the tax rate setting process through the Department of Revenue. So in the past, 3 years I've been here in front of you, we've been kind of in very strange financial times with COVID and then coming out of COVID. And so we've had larger than normal, what I would consider normal fund balances at the end of the year due to some staffing restrictions, due to the fact that we had different instructional models in play, failure to run some programs because of distancing, things like that. So it's been an interesting picture of how COVID impacted our budget process. But in general, coming into the end of the year, our goal, as always when we budget, is to ask for what we need and use as much of that as we need to perform our goal and our mission, right? We try not to ask for more than we need, and we certainly try not to ask for anything beyond those needs because it will impact taxation. So this year, what we have left to return to the taxpayers will be $470,889. For those of you that are into the math, that's like a 0.02% remainder of our budget. So we came in very, very close to the number that we asked for. We've already had our financial audit. That was completed in the second week of August. So while we haven't received the final report, it is unlikely that this number will change between now and tax rate setting. So does anyone have any questions on that particular part? And then I can kind of go into how we got to that place, what types of things go into it. No?
Janet,
Yeah,
I have a question.
sure.
It may be a typo in this letter here dated August the 9th. First paragraph towards the end. In our recent financial audit for fiscal year 22. Is that a typo?
Yes, actually, that should be fiscal year 20.
23,
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, should be 24. Yep, that's right. Yep, yep, thank you.
Good luck.
Keen eyes, we need you upstairs. We're going to pull you right up there. Any other questions? Okay. So also as part of, when I talked to you about the adjustments that come after the expenditures are left and we have additional revenues, there are some other adjustments. One of those adjustments is the ability to retain fund balance in a contingency fund. It's a state, it was voted on by the taxpayers of Newmarket. By law, we can retain anywhere between 2.5% and 5% of our unexpended, of our net assessment, which is based on property value in town. We have to have funding left at the end of the year in order to be able to retain that. So we presented this to the board in June. They voted to retain 3.5%, which is the same as the prior year. It goes up a little bit each year based on the property values, up or down. This year it went up a little bit, about net $75,000 more than we retained last year. So that is one of the adjustments. And what happens, the way that that works is before you calculate your ending fund balance, you take back the retained fund balance that you didn't use the year before, add it to your balance, and then you deduct the new amount from it. So the net change there was $75,000, roughly. So that's one of the adjustments. Another adjustment is, if you recall on our warrant last year, we had some warrant articles to fund from fund balance 2 different capital reserve funds or trust funds. One was for special ed, and one was for insurance and benefits trust. So those 2 added together were $125,000. Those also come off the balance. So those are basically our 2 adjustments that are beyond what's left at the end of the year. So any questions on the fund balance? Yeah, sure. Towns are able to retain up to 10% of their net assessed value. So this is a relatively new vehicle for school districts. We used to only, as of 2 years ago, we could retain no more than 2.5%. And when you consider the size of our budget, that's pretty significant difference between what a town can retain. The legislature changed, we're allowed to retain up to 5%. So what that basically is it's funding if something catastrophic were to happen, a roof were to fail, or we wind up with some significant move-ins to the district in special ed that we have to send out of district for tuition, or something unanticipated, we can then access this money. There is a mechanism for doing that. We can't just sit upstairs and say, hey, we're just going to spend this money. We would need to go to the board. The board would need to vote for it to happen. There has to be filing with the state and the Department of Revenue. So it's a very, it's a process that while we certainly hope that we never need to use it, it's really nice to know that we do have that. And I can tell you that there have been some school districts in the state who haven't had this at their avail, and they've wound up in a really difficult situation when they did have a catastrophic event. One of them had a building failure, and they actually had to hold a special meeting in town to go back to the taxpayers to ask them to raise and appropriate more money. And obviously, optically and practically, that's not an ideal situation. So basically what this is just an amount that, I'm sorry,
No, you're fine, it's
Oh,
the backstage.
okay.
Fine, there was just-
Okay, okay. So basically, it's a mechanism to help, it's kind of like a way for us to be able, it allows us to budget more closely, because we know we have that if we needed to expend it.
And if we don't spend it,
It comes right back, right? Yeah.
and we never had to use it.
No, not in my time here, and I can't find any records that we have used it here, so, yeah. So does anyone have any questions on that fund balance retention, or how it's used, or? No?
On
Okay.
the fund balance, and so I was curious about the 108 outstanding potential liability with the submission of tax forms. Is that just like, what does that involve? Is that-
So that is a long-standing, it predates my time here in Newmarket. It is related to the filing of Affordable Care Act 1095 forms. We have, based on what we've discovered, they were filed timely before the deadline. We have an actual return receipt from the post office and from the IRS stamp saying that they received them. But during COVID, they were very understaffed at the IRS. There were a lot of problems there. And they had reached out saying, we never got your forms. And for 2.5 years, an individual worked at trying to resolve that, was not successful in resolving that, and it resulted in a letter coming to my attention that was, a potential fine levy for not filing those forms. So since that time, we've worked with Governor Hassan's office. We have worked with the tax accountant from Plodzik and Sanderson. We're now working with McLean. They've got like 4 names down there in Manchester, with an actual tax attorney as an advocate, because we feel that we have all the documentation to prove that we actually did it, but we can't seem to get through to anybody who's willing to look at the documentation to remove that fine. So we are optimistic that we'll prevail. I don't know if they'll assess a partial penalty for a failure to fully resolve in that time frame, but nobody failed to file the necessary documents, so,
Right, thank you.
yeah, sure.
You're obviously-
Yeah. All right, so I think I'll turn it over to Todd. He's going to talk to you a little bit about the budget for the next year.
So actually, before I dive into talking about this report, I just wanted to just harken you back to March, when we had the last vote for the various local seats, but also for our budget and our warrant article. One of the things that I think the town dealt with, as well as the school district, is we noted in March, our approval rate on our proposed budget was at a low. Like, I trace back 5, 6, 7 years, and the percent in favor of our budget was low. It's still 58%, which is a substantial approval. But as the board and I and Jana processed it, we really began to ask ourselves questions about sort of future planning, and begin to really, what is this saying? And obviously, I don't need to tell anybody who lives in Newmarket. I don't. I live in Lynn. My tax assessment was done a couple of years ago, so I feel your pain. I sympathize. But the reevaluation that's come through also has added another layer of challenge to people in the community. So to the board's credit, right after the election, we began a series of dialogues at our board meetings, kind of trying to look at and wrap our heads around what are the issues were that we were dealing with in that process. But more importantly, as we started to think ahead to 25, 26, we really wanted to think very carefully as we planned that budget. And one of the processes that we always go through at the board is I asked the board to establish a budget goal for the leadership team to work towards. And the last 2 years, that goal has been a 4% increase. And again, it's not news to anybody in Newmarket, but a 4% increase in the school budget actually has resulted in a higher than that percent increase in taxes, because state revenues have gone down and all those other variables. And then this year in particular, we are in negotiations with our teachers union for their successor agreement for their contract. And the teachers group makes up 55% of our employees. So you can imagine when you look at a school budget that is, 75% personnel, you're negotiating a contract that's going to affect 55% of your employees, that's a cost item you really need to take into account. So again, to the board's credit, we engaged in a fairly lengthy dialogue about the future of our budgets, the sustainability of the level of budgeting that we had done, and more importantly, to try to prepare ourselves for some of the realities that were coming so that we would hopefully build a budget that would hopefully keep things stable. As Jana pointed out, you notice that the year-end fund balance is lower this year than it has been in the past. To me, that's a good thing. What it means is we're not asking for more than we need, and we're really trying to budget to need. You also heard Jana make reference to trust funds. And they're really, when you think about budget development in the school district, there are really three places where the money is. Personnel, the salaries to people, benefits, health insurance, things of that sort, and then really student services and programming. And so what we have attempted to do is to build trust funds to address at least some of those items. The two trust funds that the community voted to put money into, one was the Health Insurance Stabilization Trust Fund. Basically, the purpose of that is to give us a resource that doesn't require us to come to the taxpayers to have resources available in the event that we get an unexpected increase in our health insurance benefits. And if you talk to local school districts and municipalities, it's not uncommon in 1 year to get a 15% jump in your health insurance. And that's a big thing. And, so that's one area. And then student services is the other thing. And so one of the things that is very challenging in building a budget there is to recognize that there are students you have to plan for that you don't even know exist yet. Because you could have a student right today move into district that has significant needs that we have to provide for, and we may not have been able to budget for it. So we have created this trust fund for that purpose. So we've really tried to think in terms of leveling things off, so we're not like coming to the voters 1 year for this and down, up and down. We want things to be as leveled as possible. In fact, we'll talk in October, I think we're on the agenda to talk about our updated capital improvement plan. That's another area we're trying to make sure things are level so we're not having spikes. So as we talked through that with the board, we began to look at the sustainability of what would be a level of an increase that could potentially be sustainable. And so Jana did some tremendous work. We asked her to build what we call the level services budget. Tell us, and that's where this document comes in. We asked her to build a level services budget separate from the teacher's contract, because obviously that's not resolved yet. So it's going to be a separate warrant article for that. In analyzing our current budget as stands, we determined, and this is, if you're looking at the first page there, the first column, on July 15th, the level services budget was determined to be a 3.18% increase. Meaning, in order to just do exactly what we're doing now next year, we're going to have to ask for $871,720.29 of the community, and that doesn't include a teacher contract. To give you some context, teacher contracts in the past have ranged from $500,000 to $600,000 in the first year. That's a pretty typical cost. Okay, and keep in mind, if you look around what's happening in job markets, there's a lot of salary adjustments that are taking place, and so we needed to think about, we might need to be even more than that. So anyway, the level services was $871,000. So obviously, if we do nothing differently than we're doing now, negotiate the teacher contract, we're looking at potentially an increase to the taxpayers. It could be 5% or more. So the conversation then shifted to, all right, separate from that, where should we put ourselves? So the board asked Jana to go through the process of calculating what a 3% increase would look like, what a 2% increase would look like, and what a 1% increase would look like. And if you're interested, the August 1st board meeting was where we discussed that. and the board batted around those, actually it was July 11th, wasn't it? That's July 11th, excuse me, I gave you the wrong date. That's where they discussed it. And we batted around the implications of all three of these scenarios. And the board finally arrived at a 2% target for that, for us to work with. Now, right now, and again, this is at the very front edge of our budget development process. This is what the administrators in all of the buildings and departments is working with. We are attempting to create a 2% or less budget, which basically means it's $547,000 more than this current year's budget, but relative to a level funded budget, it effectively means we have to shave $335,000 out of that budget to get to that place. Okay, so that's where we are right now, and we're in the beginning process of developing that. Couple of things that I would like you to know, sort of, and obviously Jana details in great detail how these various scenarios play out. A couple of things I'd want you to know, we did have, and it was actually had higher staffing levels at that point, and so there are adjustments that need to be made. And over the last 3 years, there've been lots of adjustments, and I suspect that as we develop the upcoming budget, we're going to be similarly making more adjustments. So anyway, we're on the front edge. We're looking forward to it, but obviously, when we come to you in November, we'll find out whether we have successfully hit that target. That's our goal. Questions?
So just, I guess to make sure I understood it all correctly, then, so you're shooting for the 2%, which is $147,000. Then you would anticipate like another 500 to 600, the negotiation on top of that?
Right, because we're trying to think in terms of tax impact. In the last 2 years, last year the increase was, I believe, 3.9.
Oh, on the tax, I'm sorry, our budget.
Our budget, 3.9. Yes, and the year before that it was, I believe, 4.3. Effectively, if we are able to hold our operating budget separate from the teacher contract at 2%, and you factor in what we expect the cost of the teacher contract to be, we're hoping it would bring us in a total increase of 4%, which would be similar to where we've been the last couple of years. And again, to do as much as we can with our capital improvement budgets to set money aside so we're not having to come forward and say, hey, whoops, sorry, we got to replace the roof, and similarly with the other trust funds as well.
Right, okay, and so then Exhibit B is all the things that you kind of looked at that.
Correct, all the variables that go into creating those scenarios, yes. And that Exhibit B really is trying to give you an idea, or giving the board an idea of what positions, because when you talk about like the potential for $335,000, I mean, well, where we have it's mostly personnel, so when you start talking about, you're not going to shave $335,000 by reducing the amount of paper and the paper clips here. You have to look at structure. And so this was to give us an idea of like, okay, well, if you did reduce by a teacher, what's the total cost? Because for every teacher, there's a salary, but then there's a whole benefit package, which shouldn't be lost on anybody. But I mean, just New Hampshire retirement, the district pays almost 20% per employee for New Hampshire retirement.
for the, I don't know if you've gotten to this level of detail, but for like the deferred capital improvement, capital, pulling from the reserve funds and stuff, do you know what the kind of downstream effects of that would be? Like what projects would have to be put off or kind of
We certainly have reviewed our capital improvement plan and are ready to talk about where we're going to focus our energies. There's no question that were you to defer things, you're just saying, okay, we're going to delay a couple of years all of the projects that you need to do. And
a significant event where you're going to be forced to do something that you didn't plan on. So what I like about having a well-detailed capital plan is if you do it on schedule, you never get hit with you're less likely to get hit with a surprise. And that's the goal. So to me, that would be probably one of the last things I'd want to do. I think, looking at things like attrition as people leave, what positions can be filled, what positions do we, not need to fill. Looking at things like savings on tuition costs for SST and things like that, like what percentage of kids are taking advantage of that versus what kind of programs can we offer in-house that might keep kids in-house and less inclined to take advantage of those programs. Any other questions?
I have another question on Exhibit A. The big increases are you have provided some insights on the health and dental program for our staff, teachers, and all that. The second largest one, 8.63, is on tuition. Can you explain that, please?
That's probably mostly special education out of district placements and SST. SST is the Seco School of Technology. Last year, we had, I believe, 71 of our students go to SST. And by the way, they're wonderful programs. They are, and I can't say enough about how great those programs are. But there is a cost for every student that goes there. We're paying about $4,300 per student. So when you send 71 students to SST, commensurately, there's a bill of $285,000 you're paying to send them there. So that's tuition. And then, like I said, out of district placements due to special education needs.
And any student likes to go, they would
SST?
get accepted.
Yes, SST, well, every student is eligible to go, but not all programs have vacancies for kids. So that certainly, if a student is interested in a program, they can go tour it. They can fill out an application, and if there's a slot, then yes.
That's definitely very helpful with their application for the go to the colleges.
Yes. Yeah, there's some really exceptional programs over there. In fact, you may have seen we had a young man who was I'm trying to remember what the master chef. Help me remember, Dan. What was the competition he won?
It was for young chefs.
Yeah. But it was really very, very cool. We had one of our Newmarket kids, the top chef in the state, and actually got sent to a national competition. It's just really cool. He's actually pursuing a career in culinary arts.
Yeah, I mean, I even expand a little. SST is a wonderful program, but it isn't just that we want kids to get the benefit of it. If a kid applies and they get accepted, we don't have a choice. State law says we have to pay to send them. It isn't as though we could capitate this even if we wanted to, which we don't. But
in our business, we've hired a number of students who are in the SST program. And it's fun to watch them, come to work for us, do engineering work, do a lot of things, and then they go off to college, and I see them graduating and going on to starting some great careers. And it's a lot of fun to be able to watch that.
Yeah, it actually, I think the nature of career technology has changed dramatically since I was in school. I mean, typically, you went to a career tech program to get a training for a vocational skill, and then you went straight to the workforce. And more students are going there, and it's a pathway to some advanced career. Biomedical program is huge over there. And that draws a lot of kids, and as well as pre-engineering and a number of programs that are pathways to college careers for sure.
No, it would duplicate what my colleague said. I wanted to make sure people understood that you can't touch that. The state says this is a thing and they get to go do it. So you said 71 students
That
go
was last year, yeah.
last year.
I have it on good authority that number's a little lower this year. Our senior class is pretty small. We only have, I think, 55, 56 seniors. So naturally, the number one SST is down. I want to say it's down like 58, 59 students. So
So that's a portion of a day. Here sometimes.
Basically,
there's
the morning is year one, so basically all programs are year programs. So morning is 2 sessions for year one, depending on where you schedule, and then the afternoon is year two. Typically what happens is about 2/3 are in year one program, about a third of them are in year two. Because not all kids get in year one necessarily.
Thank you for that clarification, Tim.
So is it for juniors and seniors only? Is it all 4 years? What's
It is all but the pre-engineering program. All programs are junior-senior programs. The pre-engineering program is one that younger students can get involved in. So you can as a freshman or a sophomore anyway. Although the number generally is pretty small because typically freshmen and sophomores are focused on meeting their core requirements. So it's harder to free your schedule up to be able to, because to go, as great of a program it is, you have to plan on having basically 3 blocks of your day taken up traveling, to and from. So you lose, an hour plus just in transit.
how are they transported?
Bus picks it up.
Is that in the tuition number or is that in?
I know there's a transportation number that's covered in. Just to kind of go piggyback off what you were saying about some of the areas that have also seen increases.
In the professional, professional services,
Yeah,
for facilities, that's about, I think, 0.66% increase.
yeah, that's mostly a function of the fact that our custodial service, we have a contract with an outside service provider, GDI, and so we've been working with them over the last few years to improve the work that they've been doing, and in fact, spent quite a bit of the summer with them trying to get our cleaning schedule in the summer to be more efficient so that we would be done with enough time to give teachers the opportunity to get in the classrooms and get set up. But that's tied into that. This is our contract for GDI. And I would point out that's one of the ones that, as we think about next year's budget, that contract with them expires end this year, and so we're going to have to decide what to do with that. I would tell you that contract they were chosen 3 years ago because they were the lowest bidder, and the likelihood is that that's going to be more expensive whether we continue with GDI or anybody else. So those are other things we're trying to keep in mind as we build this budget.
Was there a bidding process
Yes.
for that?
Yep, we had, we put it out to bid, just the standard process, and we had, I believe, 3 vendors bid? Yeah, 3 vendors bid.
It's actually out for bid again right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment, just from my perspective, the transparency that you guys have provided and your approach as being, proactive rather than reactive, I think it's pretty impressive. And I think it's quite refreshing and I appreciate it.
Thank you. I have to tell you, one of the things when we were talking about the property reevaluation that just took place and looking at the segments of the real estate market that were more heavily impacted by it, I think it shouldn't be lost on anybody that mobile homes went up 127% in value, which means people in mobile homes in Newmarket next year are going to see their taxes go up pretty substantially, even though the total tax bill for the town won't go up because of the reevaluation. The distribution of it is, and people living in the more modest condos and the family-sized housing, those went up 84%. People that have the higher value homes, their properties went up probably less than the average. Total town's property valuation went up 69%. And if everybody went up 69%, everything would work out. But if you have segments that are getting a very high increase and other segments that are getting less than the average, what that means is you're redistributing the tax impact, and that's one of the things that I have to say as a New Hampshirean frustrates the bejeebus out of me, because it has nothing to do with your ability to pay. It just means that, sorry, today we decided your house is worth this, and that's what your tax bill becomes. It has nothing to do with income, and that concerns all of us, as we talked about it, and wanting to be very, very aware of that and what we can do. Unfortunately, there's only so much we can do, because we still need to provide
Positive school experience for our kids here in Newmarket. But I think being aware of that is just, it's critical.
To that, I mean,
So just,
the school boards characterize the conversation. We're trying as hard as we possibly can to control the things we can control, given that there is a very significant parts of the equation, we can't control the revenue we get from the state. We can't control the revenue we get from the federal government. We can largely not control what we pay for out-of-district placements. So the parts that we can control, we're pushing very hard to, bring them to just readjust and people can't keep eating these huge tax increases, so we can't let the spending grow, even though there are many, many things we would like to do for the students in the district.
Well, the fact that you manage things as closely as you do, all through the year after year, just speaks a lot for your effort to try to find the most value you can for the community. I appreciate that. And don't just shoot for whatever you need. I was going to ask, and this is just, I think, for our own record, if you have a fiscal year 23-24 year-end variance analysis, you can just share with the board, and we'll share it amongst ourselves. Actual budgets, that type of thing, just so we can see how we wrap up the year.
You want a copy of that report that's referenced? Is that what you're asking?
You don't need to present it. You just, if I have a copy, then I'll give it to everybody for their reference.
Absolutely. I will have, gladly do that.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay. All right, so next item on the agenda is the approval of the June 24th minutes. We shared those a couple weeks ago, actually more like a month ago. Does anybody have any adjustments you'd like to make on those? I usually read them through and maybe a small adjustment. Okay, so I have a motion to accept. I'll make the motion. Motion made by Brian Moore. Second? I'll second it. Brian Rowley, thank you, second. All in favor of approving the minutes of June 24th?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Abstain.
And you're abstaining. Thank you. Okay, so Ned Carpenter abstained. Thank you very much. The next meeting is September 30th, and at that meeting, the town will be presenting their year-end report. Okay, so anything else? No? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Okay, motion made by Brian Hickey.
Second.
Second by Ned Carpenter. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.